I'm an avid reader. And the thing I love about books is that books are like a doorway to another world. And even though I don't necessarily believe that we can read our way to a better life, I definitely believe that books can spark something in us that we can gather in a different space with someone else to help us work through it. So, one of my other beliefs about books is that we don't choose books. Books choose us at the right time. I don't feel like I've ever picked up a book that there was a message in it that was needing to get to me in order to lead me to another book and another book. And so I believe that when books find you, your question should be, what is the universe trying to tell me? So one of my favorite all-time books, and it's a book that I read every year, is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it's one of my favorite books, this edition in particularly, and I'll tell you why. So this book came to me years ago. Before I had kids in my youth, I was probably a young adult at the time. And a good friend of mine who was like a brother, his partner at the time, who is now transitioned, he was a teacher and an avid scholar. He was a reader. And we would get into these long, exhaustive conversations about our favorite books. And one time when we were discussing our favorite books, I asked myself, give me your top 3 favorites. And this book was one of them. Now, at the time, I hadn't heard of it, hadn't read it. But the way he spoke about it, I was like, I got to read this book, but I got to be ready for it. You know, some books you have to be ready to read them because you could get the information and not know what to do with it, or you can get the information and not be ready for it. So I knew this was a book I had to be ready for. So I bought it. It sat on my shelf. And fast forward, I didn't pick the book up until I was a single mother and divorced. And I was sitting in my bedroom late one night, 8 o'clock to be exact. I remember it. And I picked up the book and I read it all the way through. It took me 3 hours. And I cried. I cried at the introduction. What it reminded me of in the moment when I read it was that I was in the middle of my purpose. And even though it had no resemblance of anything purposeful, I was in my purpose at that moment. And so the book was speaking directly to me. And one of the things I love, absolutely love, about the introduction is Paulo Coelho speaks about that his whole life he wanted to be a writer. And he wrote books before The Alchemist, but they didn't do as well as The Alchemist. And The Alchemist was it was the book that he birthed for the world. It wasn't for him. It was the book that changed his life. And I never shall forget that he said when he was writing in the introduction, he said he remembered getting an email from his publisher and they were telling him about his book being spotted with the likes of Bill Clinton and Julia Roberts. And even then, it never dawned on him that he had made it because he was so busy with his head down trying to live out his purpose and create something that would allow him to be the writer he always saw himself as. Let me know of any other Paulo Coelho books that you've read that you like, in addition to The Alchemist.